The Minsk agreement of February 12th has reignited hopes of a peaceful settlement to the crisis in East Ukraine, but much will depend in the coming months on the work of the OSCE, an organization which has found itself thrust into the limelight over the past year of conflict in Ukraine. We're joined today by Michael Bociurkiw, OSCE Spokesperson for the Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. Michael, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
You find yourselves very often caught in the middle, damned if you do, damned if you don't, criticized by both sides for what you have not done and what you haven't done. Could you tell us a little bit about the reactions you get from the different media and how you've noticed the different approaches to your work from the Russian media, the Ukrainian media, and the Western or international media?
Well, it's been an interesting journey for us all, a learning experience, no doubt about it. We've now been on the ground almost a year. And we found, I think, that the media coverage, goes up and down depending on the events of the day. I can tell you that, for example, during MH17, the interest in us was just overwhelming, very intensive. And, it was a tragic event, and the OSCE played a very kind of central role in, for example, facilitating access for all the experts that came in to help find human remains, debris, investigate, and so on. But we found that what happened in the fall is, as the conflict kind of dragged on, grinded on, if you will, that you're right, we were very much in the center of things. And I think that people said, what is the OSCE doing? The conflict isn't ending, it's grinding on. And to us, it was a signal that we needed to do more to get a better understanding out to people, to ordinary people, about what exactly our mandate is and why we're here. So we point out basically two things. One, we are here at the invitation of the Ukrainian government. And secondly, we're here to establish the facts, to report, in other words, being kind of the ears and eyes of the international community on the ground, and also to facilitate dialogue. And that second point, if I could just give you a quick example of facilitating dialogue. As you know, right now there are about 1 million internally displaced people throughout Ukraine. And there are many host communities there that have received, for example, displaced people from the East. And there's a real role for organizations like ours to help facilitate the dialogue, to make sure that tensions are eased or don't appear whatsoever. So we've been doing that for months. And now I think we're in a slightly different position where the interest in us is very, very intense, hence probably the bags under my eyes. But we've been up a lot, answering questions very patiently to Ukrainian media, international media, Russian media too, of course. And, the questions are different, but for the international media, it's a very effective tool, of course, for us to report to our 57 participating states what the situation is on the ground, what we're doing, what perhaps some of our needs are. And then for Ukrainian media, of course, they're very, very interested in our daily reports. I hold one of them in my hands. And then also we started producing updated reports twice a day, so it can go to me and then I can talk to media like yourselves and tell you what's going out on the field.
Do you think there are some misconceptions about what you can and can't do, that people are expecting you to go in there and be a kind of, to have an authority that perhaps the monitors on the ground simply don't have in a military environment?
Absolutely there is. One thing we always get is a lot of people almost look at us as a humanitarian organization and why aren't we delivering aid? But I can tell you that we do nonetheless play a big role in alleviating the humanitarian situation. Yesterday, for example, we were able, because of the ceasefire in certain areas, we were able to go to the area near Donetsk airport, and we found out that they haven't had power and water there for a month. And we went to another village near Donetsk for the first time because there was no shelling, and people there are in a very, very difficult position, also without water, without electricity. But the other big, perhaps, misconception is that we will bring about a solution to the conflict. Our role, again, is to monitor, establish the facts, and then the information that we collect on a daily basis goes up to higher levels, to our 57 participating states, to heads of state, journalists, diplomats, and it's up to them to draw conclusions or take actions.
I think one of the key issues that we're seeing amongst the fog of war, so to speak, in the conflict zone is sort of who did it environment with the shelling. Yeah. We see very often the shelling attacks happen and immediately the accusations and counter-accusations begin. And very often everyone looks to the OSCE and says, well, let's see and wait to see what they say. Now, clearly you have to be very careful with your wording of these sort of reports, but there have been a number of reports which have been quite clear. I think one that sticks in mind would be the Mariupol attack, where it was quite clearly stated. Volnovakha, of course, as well. There's numerous attacks within Donetsk itself which have raised issues about where the firing actually came from. How do you approach these issues, and how confident can you be when coming out with statements which will have huge political ramifications?
Yeah, well, it's not an easy position to be in, clearly, but we're up to the job. We have now in Ukraine, we're going to soon be approaching 500 international monitors in 10 cities across Ukraine. Now, 2/3 of those monitors are going to be in the east, so we're in the neighborhood right now of 300 or so. That'll go to 350. Half of those, at least, are military, former military or on loan to the mission, and they have the really good skills to observe whether it's military equipment, whether it's doing, for example, what we call crater analysis, trying to figure out the direction from which a missile landed. Now, there are a number of constraints to the job that we do. One of them is restrictions on freedom of movement. The other one is simply the fact that we go to places that are very, very dangerous. And when we are investigating, for example, where missiles landed, we could be subject to shelling as well. But where possible, we do try to indicate from which direction a missile came. And very rarely are we in a position to say, well, it came from territory run by these guys or under the control of those guys. But you're right, in the case of Mariupol, we were able to say that this came from the direction of territory that were in control by rebel groups. The wording, of course, is very, very carefully scrutinized, sliced and diced. We even have enthusiastic people on social media cutting and pasting parts of our daily report and posting it on Twitter. So, but we go as far as we can, but we're not here to assign blame or ascribe fault to a certain party.
You mentioned access issues. In the last few days, there have been widespread reports of the OSCE monitors being unable to get into Debaltseve. In the past, it was commonplace, I think, for them to be unable to get towards Donetsk airport when that was the centre of the fighting. How much bargaining has to go on the ground to get where you need to go? And is there a danger of monitors being compromised by being chaperoned, for example, by the military forces in the area?
Well, we don't bargain, we don't cut deals. We arrange or discuss access with the various parties. There are good days and there are bad days. I can tell you that right now, of course, Debaltseve is in the news, and we have not been to Debaltseve for quite some time because of the shelling, but also we haven't been there since the new ceasefire deal was signed. And we're insisting on access. We have had, I can tell you, very, very intensive talks with the various sides in Soledar over the past 24 hours. And as of now, as of this moment, we haven't been able to get the guarantees, security guarantees, to get into Debaltseve. Why is it important for us to get there? Two reasons. One is, of course, we have to report to the world what the situation is. And secondly, there does appear to be quite a dire humanitarian situation unfolding there. 2,000-3,000, possibly more civilians still trapped in that area. Now, I can tell you that there are also tricky areas where we haven't been into for a while. For example, in the southern Luhansk Oblast, where small, irregular armed groups are active, or where Cossacks are active. We've been trying to get to Novoazovsk for some weeks. That access is still being prevented. But having said that, I don't want to give an impression of negativity. I want to say that recently we have been to places where we haven't been for quite some time because there has been a calm, a localized ceasefire, if you will, and now we have access.
The mission, the monitoring mission, has been in place now since April, I think, isn't it, in East Ukraine? Since in March, April, since the first signs of serious unrest in the region. Over that period, obviously, you've been dealing with, to an extent, different people, but also a lot of the same people. How does the relationship building process go, and how important is that to making the mission a success?
Well, we have, of course, two things going in our favor. One is we're very familiar with the lay of the land by now. I mean, I just looked at a map of the last 3 days. In fact, it was presented to the Permanent Council of the OSCE yesterday, of where our patrols have gone since the ceasefire started. And if you look at the whole conflict zone, it's like covered with almost spaghetti routes, you know, that we've been in so many places, covered a lot of ground, 20 patrols a day. The other thing is, having been here for so long, we do have good relationships with the interlocutors, whether on the rebel side. I mean, we're very familiar to the various ministries, to the presidential administration. Our chief monitor, Ambassador Apakan, meets regularly with the most senior officials on the Ukrainian side. And also, we do travel a lot. We were just in Dnipropetrovsk. We met with the governor's officials there. And I must say, we received a very, very good reception. And they do seem to look at us as playing a very key role in helping resolve the conflict and reduce tensions. But once again, I mean, the M817 example is a good one, where day after day after day, and including up to now, is we facilitated access for experts, for emergency workers, first responders. And I think this showed, on one side, the complexity of it, but on the other side of what we're able to do when these communication lines are open and effective.
Would it be fair to say that both sides, or all sides perhaps in the conflict, and all the different players are increasingly recognizing the importance for the peace process and for the future settlement of having the OSCE there?
Well, I would like to say that, but as we speak, we're being denied access to Debaltseve. This is unacceptable. The rebel side is not keeping up their end of the deal in terms of allowing the OSCE to freely monitor the ceasefire area. And we issued a very strong statement yesterday evening. We were saying that this is unacceptable and that it not only jeopardizes our mandate, but it also could create very severe consequences on the ground. There is no doubt in our mind that Debaltseve is part of the ceasefire, number one. And then secondly is that we don't want to see a situation where the rebel groups create new facts or new reality on the ground. So we're pressing our case to get there. It's not proving easy, but we've sent our deputy chief monitor and quite a large team down there to get access for the mission.
Now, the Minsk agreement, which has been reached last week, which is already being questioned widely because of the ongoing fighting, but there remains significant hope that it can be made to work somehow. If it is made to work, a huge amount of the burden will fall on the OSCE to monitor that and to make sure it is being adhered to. Now, you're increasing the number of monitors, but the numbers are not huge in proportionally speaking. I mean, it's arguably, you know, we might want to see like thousands more. I don't appreciate that might not be possible, but can you tell us a little bit about the steps that are being taken to prepare the mission to take on this responsibility?
Well, this was a very big topic at the last Permanent Council of the OSCE in Vienna, where Ambassador Apakan presented, and also yesterday where we had a special session of the Permanent Council dedicated entirely to Ukraine, and Ambassador Apakan spoke by video link. Right, I mean, we're talking about a huge area, potentially bigger than the size of Switzerland or twice the size of the state of Vermont. Secondly is that we've made it clear that getting up to 500 monitors is one thing, but also we need to enhance our capabilities. We have 2 of 4 drones still operational. We will need more. We will need to have available satellite imagery, radars, a whole bunch of high-tech equipment, and also more armored vehicles, because every time we introduce 4 new monitors into the theater, we need another armored vehicle, and these things are not easily found sometimes. So we've gone to our participating states and put out this appeal for armored vehicles, high-tech equipment, other resources to help us achieve the mission. There's also the aspect of border monitoring. The length of the border under rebel control at the moment is about 475 kilometers. That's a big area to patrol. And I don't think the participating states have rolled out increasing the size of the mission, but as the days go by, of course, we'll have a better idea.
You mentioned the border, I mean, and when you actually see footage from the border, I think it's surprising to some people to find that it actually is very much open. I mean, it's wide open, literally. Is it feasible even to monitor such a long stretch when, it would be to insert troops, weapons, any form of aid, or to have an effective monitoring system there? I mean, you would need presumably thousands upon thousands of monitors, or maybe dozens of drones, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways to monitor situations without having too many folks on the ground. Technology can handle a lot of this sometimes. So we're still having a close look at that at border monitoring. But for the moment, of course, we're focused on the hotspot areas in the east, Donetsk, of course, Mariupol, Kramatorsk, Debaltseve as we speak. And again, I think as the days go by, we'll have a better idea of what the resources are going to be required.
Now, there was a lot of controversy some months ago now, but I think still in the mix, as it were, about the Russian participation within the observer mission. The Ukrainian government certainly, and increasingly Western governments, the EU recently in its latest sanctions actually specifically targeted Russian military and cited that they were responsible for campaigns in Ukraine. So it was the most gloves-off comments to date from the EU itself. But the OSCE, Russia continues to play a role in that. Do you see that changing, or you see the Russian?
Look, the Russian Federation is one of 57 member states of the OSCE, as is Ukraine, as is Canada, the US. They, like anybody else, do have a right to second monitors to the mission. They have done so, not in great numbers. Out of 500 monitors, we'll probably still have around 20 or so from the Russian Federation. It's about the same number, by the way, as from my country, Canada. But you know, when someone comes on into the mission, they do sign a very strict code of conduct. One of the provisions of that code of conduct is not to share information with third parties. And also, our colleagues from the Russian Federation, as does everyone else, they work very closely in tight teams every day. I've met many of them, and a lot of them are very effective in, very active participants in the mission. There has been a lot of exaggerated reporting or allegations made against the mission. At one point, someone reported that 80 or 90% of our monitors in Mariupol were Russian. Well, that's nonsense. There was like one or two. So, but that's part of the thing we deal with day after day, especially on social media, allegations coming across that we have hundreds of Russians, or that we don't see properly. But I have to tell you, a lot of our colleagues, all of our colleagues, in fact, in the East, day after day after day, take a lot of risk in very dangerous conditions, reporting the facts on the ground. And this is really solid, verified information that is used by decision makers to decide what to do with the conflict. So it's very frustrating in a way sometimes when people take to social media, ridicule the mission. And I can tell you that our monitors are very hardworking. Many of them at the moment with the conflict in the way it is have not taken leave for a long time. They've been in that conflict zone for a long time. They take a lot of risk on themselves.
It's undoubtedly extremely stressful for the people on the ground in the East, as it is for many millions of people in Ukraine. Is that, in terms of the briefings, the guidelines you give to your monitors in the East, do you offer psychological counselling, ways of dealing with the trauma of war, the horrors, and also how they should be dealing with the victims of the conflict, or even the participant? Yeah,
there are basically two aspects. We have very extensive what's called heat training. It's training for working conflict conditions. Up until now, it's been done in Austria, and it covers everything from, for example, what do you do to when you're kidnapped, to how do you deal with the media even. And also, once the monitors come to Kiev, they're given additional training here. And it is, we had, you may recall, a situation where 8 of our international monitors were kidnapped for an entire month. And you can imagine when they came out, it was very difficult on some of them. So, of course, a lot of psychosocial support was offered at that time. And now that we've been here for as long as we have, and now where the conflict has become quite complex, we do realize that there's a need to, for example, give monitors time off, to rotate them in and out of the zone, to offer them, everything from medical evacuation to psychosocial support. So that's taken very, very seriously now.
The conflict in East Ukraine has been for the OSCE a watershed, I would imagine, as an organisation. It certainly thrust the OSCE into the international spotlight and introduced international audiences to the work that you are doing. In terms of your organisation, what are the key lessons, and how is it changing the OSCE, the way you approach conflict zones, the way you approach your work?
Well, I can tell you that probably by now people in small-town America have heard of the OSCE or one time or another. During the MH17 disaster, we were in the front of the news all over the place, and that's happening again right now as we speak. The attention is very intense. And I think, you know, there are a number of aspects here, but it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest mission the OSCE has ever launched. And I think also we're learning as we go along. We're learning, for example, that when you have so many monitors in such a concentrated area, you know, in Donetsk, for example, our monitors are living all in the same hotel. They have a curfew. There's very little chance for recreation. So you have to take all of that into account and manage them and make sure that they get time off, proper rest. Also, in terms of reporting, I think the OSCE has become very innovative in terms of how we report. We report daily right now, and as time has gone on, I think those reports have improved quite a bit. They're much easier to read, for instance, now. And then we've also gone into thematic reports. We've done one on internally displaced people. We've just done a very, very extensive study here in Ukraine on the evolving media landscape, both Western and Eastern Ukraine. And it's very interesting in Eastern Ukraine to be able to report. We'll be reporting, coming out with this document soon, about how things have changed in areas of Eastern Ukraine where media outlets are really struggling. For a while, like in Sloviansk, for example, was in rebel control, and then it's come back to Ukrainian control. Well, there are some outlets that have been totally destroyed, or they're suffering from a brain drain, or they no longer have advertising revenue to support them. These are kind of innovative topics that we're all studying. The other thing, you know, the work we've done, and it's very, very extensive in terms of facilitating dialogue between various groups, has yielded, I think, very positive results. I think by the time this mission ends, there'll be a lot of really constructive lessons learned that can go to help future missions.
Well, Michael Bociurkiw, thank you very much for joining us in the Ukraine Today newsroom. This has been Peter Dickinson. Now back to the news.